Hello, everyone. My name is Olivia Anunobi. I'm a licensed specialist in school psychology student at Houston Christian University. I'm going to be discussing our video assignment for this week, which is the response to crises and challenges during disasters. So this assignment actually is something that I can relate to because I've witnessed natural disasters here in Houston, especially during the time that there were hurricanes. So I do understand all the different phases of the disaster. I do understand the emotional phase, the heroic, the disillusionment phase. During a heroic phase of natural disaster, every second does count as teams rush to save life of those that are injured. They deliver food and water, shelter in the heart of chaos. Most times, response teams are always standby. They are there to push through the confusion, danger. They make sure that they work together with urgency because sometimes the roads are collapsing and uncertainty is always in the air. During this phase, survivors may deny the impact that this disaster is having on their homes. They may also tell you that the disaster is not having any impact on them and their families, which is not true. And also, they try to use whatever extra measures they can to make sure that they protect their homes and their families. But the thing about disaster is that most times when it happens, it's affecting like the whole community. Everyone is going through these phases together. So most times the response team has a lot of work to do because many people typically in natural disasters everyone is affected. So that you have the search and rescue team. They spend a lot of energy trying themselves and trying to help others because events are mostly ongoing. People are open spiritually and emotional. And then there's also an urgent need to locate and rescue individuals that are trapped or injured. And most times they do not know where they are. So the medical team, they are always really very swift at first aid and expert medical attention to these people that are injured, and they're trying to reach out to at least make sure that everyone gets the basic survival supplies to the people that are affected. Uh, so most times they make sure that they get them water, food, and other necessities. So you have the search and response team that are doing this. And then one most important thing again during this heroic phase is that safety matters a lot because people must be evacuated out of danger zone to ensure that everyone is safe. Sometimes communication is also very key because we want to make sure that families are reconnected, reunited. And then sometimes when this disaster happen, the line of communication breaks down, and most times people are not able to reconnect with their families and their relatives. So that also hampers moving forward, as well as affecting the response or the search and rescue uh, uh, um, team. So most times, in helping to coordinate, rescue, and also connect this family, people always make sure that they have a means of communication, just like the one that happened recently in when Jamaica had their storm. A lot of the loved ones were out, but they could not connect or reconnect with their families, and they didn't know if their family were safe or even alive. So it's just a communication piece that is highly very important to make sure that everyone is reconnecting with their families, and that's sometimes a very big challenge during this phase. So there's always a lot of chaos and there's a lot of disorganization because there's a lot of uncertainty. People don't know when their business is going to go back to their usual phase. And during these challenges, coupled with the damage to infrastructure, this creates a lot of issues to mostly people getting injured. Also, there's also risk of injury, and actually also the survivors as well as getting injured as well from the collapsed infrastructure. So the best thing that is very important during this phase is to make sure that safety is of paramount, that the best safety is provided to everyone, and then that everyone is safe, and then the events during this phase is always ongoing. So the next phase that I will be talking about is the honeymoon phase, which is also known as the crash point. So during this crash point, which is a very important period during a crisis and challenges in a disaster, um, it's always like when the initial optimism, adrenaline of community bonding and influx of external aid begins to fade away, then the people are like they are back to having a harsh reality. People are now understanding that there has been a lot more challenges going up a road ahead of them than they expected, than they even anticipated. So a lot of people, they become so exhausted, they become stressed and discouraged. That's why they call it the crash point. It's used to describe like a sharp drop in morale and the onset of negative emotions. So everyone is impacted at that time, even with the first responders and workers, volunteers. So the burnout sets in, which will happen when there is immediate crisis needs. So you have all the adrenaline rushing, and as you are just trying to have an optimistic look, like, okay, we're going to take one day at a time. You can start at that time, people start calling their insurance company. They can start doing all the things that they need to do to start fixing and repairing the damages. And then that's when the reality sets in. So they are faced with like challenges such as the insurance may not be able to pay for all the damages, and as well as they might not be able to get their home back. And then they might also realize that they might not have been possible to have even their loved ones, that at that time they are able to realize that they will not be able to connect like back to them. They've lost them during this disaster. So now they're beginning to understand and deal with the reality. And then there is this resource depletion. And sometimes the agencies that were out telling them that they will be able to help or even help them get back on their feet are no longer able to do so. So the volunteer support, actually, as well as every other thing that was in the heroic phase, starts to slow down, especially months after a storm. And then most times there's also bureaucratic hassle in terms of completing paperwork to get some of the damages fixed. So survivors find themselves tangled in a web of paperwork procedures, and then it starts to weigh down on them both heavily, mentally, emotionally, and physically, because of some of the things that they are trying to compartmentalize after a storm. So they deal with a lot of emotional, physical fatigue, and then triggers begins to happen. So it's always very difficult at this stage. So after the crash, individual and communities, they drift into what is called the disillusionment phase. So during this time is a long disillusionment phase is a long mark stretched by anger, resentment, growing need for support before the slowdown towards rebuilding begins. It's definitely an emotional coaster, because now people are trying to rebuild and get back their life to normal and trying to get some of the things that they had before. And during this disillusionment phase unfolds after a natural disaster, survivors, just sit and watch their early hopes slip away, and they are replaced by waves of disappointment, frustration, anger. They depart of support, resources, services, volunteers, and as well as the media coverage stopped. There's no more news on whatever they have suffered. And then they start feeling lonely. They do not know how to handle the situation. And most times, nobody really cares anymore because it's been a month, or months after this disaster happened. And then even sometimes they are being asked to get over it. It's been a month and no one really cares anymore or even to help them out, just like as it was in the beginning. Now, so the reality now sets in, and they are kind of like disappointed and really very angry. And then the key experiences interface is like the fading support, unfulfilled promises happening, emotional mental toll, which might increase the negative coping strategies, and this a shift in focus. So most times, some of these frustrations, like many of the survivors, we push them towards unhealthy ways of coping, such as turning into substances or slipping into burnt out, as individuals and family turn inward to tackle their own long-term recovery. And then the one strong sense of community and spirits, community of spirits, as it begins to fade. So recovery from what happened after a storm. So some people might develop PTSD, which is the post-traumatic syndrome. So recovering from post-traumatic syndrome after a natural disaster is possible sometimes with proven therapies such as cognitive processing therapy, as well as cognitive behavioral therapy, and also some other therapies that might be very effective would be prolonged exposure therapy, in addition to professional support, nurturing themselves through healthy routines and reaching out to people that can help, as well as taking break and distressing from the news, and try to deal with this as each day comes by.